Alright, hey again everyone. Welcome to this little burst of bonus stuff by way for us to follow up and consider, perhaps in a bit more detail, some of the questions the Sunday session might have raised for us. Whether you're on your own, with a friend or three, or doing this as part of a house group or small group of like-minded folks, I'll just lead us through a few short thoughts interspersed by some questions for reflection, which will come up on the screen. The idea is for you to pause the screen on these questions as they come up, and then when you're done thinking those things through, just press play for the next little chunk of content. We'll also add a link to a written version of the questions if that would be helpful too, just underneath this video on the comments page. So if that sounds okay, we'll crack on. But of course, this is the first one of these, so we'll see how we do. So let me know if it's a hit, a miss, or a maybe, what you might want more of, what you might want less of, and so on. But at the top of the session, I led us in praying for greater self-awareness, greater awareness of others, and a greater awareness of God. And so I guess an opening question perhaps for us to consider would be this. How would you say each of these three levels of awareness, self-awareness, awareness of others, awareness of God, have grown in your life over these last 6 months? Could be in major ways, could be in small ways. How has your awareness of yourself, of others, and of God grown in recent times? All right, then thinking about what you've considered or shared. Another question. To what extent would you say these three kinds of awareness, of self, of others, of God, are connected? For example, how might a greater level of self-awareness help us to empathise more with others? Or how might a greater sense of empathy for others increase our awareness of God in our lives? Have a think on those things. Now, we're in fridge magnet heaven with this one. A little Facebook meme I saw that says this. It's not the joy that makes us grateful. It's the gratitude that makes us joyful. So our question is, do you agree with this idea? And to what extent have you found this to be the case in your own life? Now, in the story of Jesus healing these 10 lepers from Luke chapter 17, one of the interesting things to note was that there were two different words used to describe the healing which this one Samaritan guy received. First up, as with all the other 9, this guy was healed in the sense of being cured. Iomai being the Greek word, in the sense of being cured medically. But then when he returns to Jesus to say thank you, Jesus uses a different word, sesoken, to describe the healing. A sense of this guy being saved as well. I went on to suggest that true healing will therefore lead to change. We may well be cured or saved from something, but we're also being saved for something. A new way of living in light of the healing which has been received. And so let's return to the question I posed back in the session and see what springs up in your mind. In what ways might you have been refreshed, released, or healed by God over recent months? And then a follow-up to this. What might you need to put in place to ensure that this healing leads to permanent change? And then a third little chunk to this. If you're part of a church or community group, perhaps think about how these questions might apply to your corporate life together as well. As I said in a session, for others of us, it might be that we don't feel healed of anything yet, but rather long for that healing to still take place. And so a question for you, probably a question for all of us still. What kinds of things do you still long for God to heal, to lift, to refresh in your life today? But secondly, connected, what changes could you imagine that healing would lead to? As I said in this session, in my experience, it's often our ability to visualize what a better future might look like that can often be a catalyst for God's healing process to begin. Indeed, sometimes the decision to make changes in our lives can in themselves become an act of healing. We might say that's where the self-control aspect of the fruit of the Spirit comes in. Now, I know some of the changes in our lives through lockdown have been imposed upon us, and God in His goodness will be working through and at times despite those circumstances for our well-being. And yet sometimes, like an addict giving up their fix or a workaholic putting better boundaries in place, the decision to make changes marks the beginning of God's healing taking place in our lives. At the end of their encounter, Jesus tells a Samaritan guy, "Your faith has made you well." I guess all this leads us to consider this question. What role might we have to play in enabling or working with God's healing processes in our lives? I'll say that again. What role might we have to play in enabling or working with God's healing processes in our lives? Part one. But then secondly, if we do have an active part to play, how might we stop this from simply becoming an extra burden on us, pressurizing us into thinking we must try harder in order to be healed? And then finally, connected to this, a third little part and last one for now. What role might we be called to play in helping those around us to experience the ongoing healing of Jesus in their lives? And I suspect that'll do for now. As I say, do let me know if this kind of format is something which might prove to be helpful for you or your group going forward. We can always adjust it or tweak it or smash it apart if it's not working, and we'll try something else. But let me know your thoughts on this. But for the time being, we'll do this again next time, and for the coming weeks at least, as things bed in bit by bit. Until then, take care, and we'll get together again soon.